On finding one pearl of great value, the merchant went and sold all that he had and bought it. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Ruthie and I are just back from a vacation in which we visited friends in the Chesapeake Bay area of Virginia and Maryland. I will confess that one of my major goals on this trip was to eat crabs in every way imaginable. And that goal I accomplished. On our last day there, in fact, I even had a hard-shell crab stuffed with a crab cake. The whole thing was deep fried, claws and all, with melted butter on the side for dipping. I realize it is blasphemy to suggest an additional recipe for the waffle shop, but if ever we did, that should be it. One of the things I like to do on vacation is read a book about the place where I'm traveling. Not surprisingly, the one I picked was about crabs. It was entitled Beautiful Swimmers, Watermen, Crabs, and the Chesapeake Bay by William Warner. William's project was to understand the biology of crabs and figure out why the unique blend of fresh and salt water in the Chesapeake Bay is so well suited for them. And he accomplished that very well. But as he went out on boats and talked with the men and women who made their living catching crabs, William discovered something that he did not expect. Rather than seeing themselves as competitors, these crab catchers had become a close-knit community and even had come up with their own language. They would gather around the liar's bench on the Crisfield County dock and say such things as, "Crabs are out there, but they ain't for everyone to catch. All those stumps, that's where the doublers are at, hiding in the stumps. Some is still working the bald spots, I hear, throwing down the bear pot. Way I figure it, though, you got to go way down the banks. Get the jimmy, but not the sook." Through their evenings of sharing tips and telling these yarns, these individual catchers of crabs were redefined into a community of watermen, and that's what they wanted to be called. In what could often be a perilous profession, they looked out for and they cared for each other. As he listened to their stories, William was changed too. He was no longer simply a science and commerce reporter. He was now the chronicler of the stories of these watermen. His book now sang. It won the Pulitzer Prize for nonfiction in 1977. But William's real reward was having his identity redefined by encountering a people he did not expect. In today's gospel passage, Jesus uses short parables to compare the kingdom of heaven to a number of things. He said it is like a mustard seed, like yeast, like a treasure, and like a net. In only one of these parables does he compare the kingdom of heaven to a person. In the parable of the pearl of great value, notice that the kingdom of heaven is not compared to the pearl, but to the merchant. We often jump too quick to allegory and think of Jesus as both the merchant and the pearl, the seeker and that which is being sought. As Eileen pointed out a couple of weeks ago, what if we see the sower or the merchant as a real-life person, as even one of us? That is humbling. Like the watermen of the Chesapeake Bay, this merchant is engaged in maritime commerce. He is seeking fine pearls from oysters to acquire and then sell at a higher price. But when he comes across one magnificent pearl, he does something strange and on the surface, foolish. He liquidates all his holdings and buys that one pearl. His encounter with this one pearl changes his whole identity. He is no longer a merchant who buys and sells, for he no longer has any money with which to buy, nor a shop in which to sell. He is now something else. Perhaps he is a curator or caretaker for that one pearl. Perhaps, though, his new identity is really that of a lover. Two of the friends we visited on our trip are Gary and Lindy. They were the first couple we met at seminary at Yale, and the four of us became instant friends. Lindy had been both a professional and volunteer with youth work and a variety of ministries and churches in Southern Virginia, and she was on track to become a priest. She is the best prayer I have ever known. During our morning and evening prayer services, we would often be given a long list of names of people for which to pray. When it came Lindy's turn to pray that list, it was as if each person was being cradled and caressed and then lifted up to the presence of God. Her husband, Gary, is a retired naval flight officer who enrolled in seminary with her, not to become a priest, but to become a counselor. He has the look of a big old gentle teddy bear. Over the course of our time together at Yale, Lindy was diagnosed with a rare form of dementia. She was able to complete her degree program, but she had to give up her dream of becoming a priest. As her condition deteriorated, Gary's role began to change. While he was still a student and then a counselor, his primary role became that of caregiver. When they returned to Virginia, Lindy volunteered to offer ministry in a women's prison and did that as long as she was able. When she could no longer serve, she was that wonderful prayer that I remember, praying over people and photos at home. When we saw them last week, Lindy was no longer able to speak, but she could still smile. Gary continues to be her gentle caregiver. He does now have some assistance at home, which enables him to go out and offer counseling to others, primarily to fellow caregivers. While Gary and Lindy came to seminary seeking ways to serve God in second careers, their path took an unexpected and certainly unwanted detour. Their faithful response led them to be redefined in new roles. On the surface, one might say these roles are caregiver and care recipient. But when we were in their presence, Ruthie and I saw something much deeper. They have been redefined as the most profound lover and beloved I have ever seen, often exchanging those roles. Long ago, they had found their one magnificent pearl, the complete and total love of Christ, and they see and appreciate that love in each other's eyes and in each other's smiles. When we left, I leaned over to kiss Lindy on the cheek and whispered, "God bless you." And she gave me the gift of the biggest smile of the day. Like the merchant of the parable, like the waterman of the Chesapeake Bay, like the writer who told their stories, there is no doubt that Gary and Lindy have found their one magnificent pearl, and it is worth everything.